one thing that I wish more people understood and were aware of, or just realized when it comes to writing, when it comes to art, painting, any kind of art, theater, whatever it is that you're into, is that yes, there are no rules in art, but there are principles. So what does that mean? Let's dive into this together, because I wrote about this a while ago, but I've been meaning to make a video about it for a while now. So, here we are. Why I've been meaning to talk about this is because you can hear this kind of talk in the art circles and in the writing circles, like, yeah, there are no rules, but at the same time, people are telling you, oh, but you need to use this structure, but be free, you can do whatever you want, but also you need to follow like these guidelines. And also, like, yeah, there are no rules, but your character needs to have a goal. Things like that, right? And it can seem a little bit confusing, and it can seem a little bit like, okay, so which is it? At the same time, there are people that are telling you, people from the craft or the industry or the art, like however you look at it, wherever you look at, there are people telling you that there are certain, guidelines that are just good to follow if you want to be good at writing. And I'm sure that applies to any other kind of art as well. And also, you can see that, time and time again, there are some artists who, seemingly rebel against the rules that were dictated by some authority of the time, and then their art actually became super successful and popular and kind of the new canon, right? So you're like, well, what's up with that? And yeah, this is my explanation of that. This is my approach to it, and it makes a lot of sense to me. This is how I approach my own writing, and how I would advise you to approach your own writing, or, your own art, whatever it is that you like to do. So let me repeat that. There are no rules in art, but there are principles. Let's first talk about this first part, right? There are no rules in art. So the thing is, there is this, like, the essence of the issue is in the word rule, okay? Because the thing is, the word rule implies three things, okay? It implies authority, so that's like someone or some institution or a person or, whoever is authority in this area has decided and declared this is the rule, right, that you must follow. And it implies, number two, second thing, I am European after all. Second thing, it implies obedience. So this is a rule that you must adhere to or not. Okay, so you either follow this rule or you don't. The aim of the rule is, if a rule exists, the intention, the purpose of that rule is that people will follow it. And then there's always a question of like, okay, are you following this rule or not? Are you obeying the rule or not? Okay. And number three, the word rule implies some sort of consequences. Okay. So if you do not follow the rule, if you break this rule, which is possible if you're using the word rule, then you will face some sort of punishment, some sort of consequences, either by that authority that we talked about, or, just in general, for your disobedience. Your disobedience will be punished. And here's the thing. None of these three things, authority, obedience, and punishment, what did I say? Consequence. None of these things exist in art. Yes, you have certain authorities in art. You have certain institutions who can say, yeah, I am this person. I have studied this a lot, and I know what is correct and incorrect, and I know what is good art and not good art. Okay, but that's just like a person. They're not really, no one who says, oh, I am an authority in creative writing, or I am an authority in screenwriting, or whatever. Like, no one is actually an authority, like, on actual screenwriting. You know what I mean? It's just within a certain context. It's within a certain, maybe like geographic or cultural context, or it's within a certain institution. And yes, okay, if you want, right, like, for example, if your dream is to make it in Hollywood, then you do have certain authorities, right? But that's not art, right? You can always write movies without being in Hollywood. Okay, you can always do whatever you want, and you never have to, like, no matter what anyone who is an authority in whatever field says, you never have to follow what they say. You can always make art, like, independent of them, and it will just exist, and there will be no bad consequences. Except for, again, like I said, if you want to work in Hollywood, but you don't adhere to certain rules there, then the consequence, the punishment will be, you won't be able to work in Hollywood, or like whatever. I don't know. I don't know why I'm talking about Hollywood now, because like I have never been there. I don't work there. I don't know. It's just, it's just something that, like, we all watch Hollywood movies, and I feel like that's a culture and an industry that we're all at least somewhat familiar with. So I guess that's why it made sense. But yeah, my point is, so like, yeah, you do have certain, even here in Slovenia, of course, there are certain scenes, and within that scene, there is an authority. There are people that are regarded highly. There are people who say, oh, this should be done this way, this should be done that way, blah, 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 blah. And, you can choose to be obedient or not obedient, and there will be consequences to that. But that is not art itself. That's my point. That is always just like a branch of an industry, an institution. Like, it is never just like so many other artists have done in history. You can always do something else, something that, some institutions says, oh, you should do things this way, and you're like, well, no, I won't. And then maybe you do it differently, and actually you gain traction by doing that, and you gain more and more fans, and then before you know it, you've become the institution, and you've become the authority in a certain field, and all of a sudden there are some other youngsters that are rebelling against the rules that you've set, or something like that. Okay, so that's what I mean when I say there are no rules in art, because whatever art you take, you really can do whatever you want. You really can. Okay, it's like in life, okay? You are all the actual rules, the actual authorities, the actual consequences are always confined within a certain circle, right? Institution, area, I don't know, social group, town, city, whatever, network. But you don't have to be confined to that, right? That is not art itself, even though sometimes people can get a bit megalomaniacal, and think that, oh, I am the institution, I am ballet. Like, no, you're not. Okay. All respect to you, or not, whatever, depends on who we're talking about. These are all just people. And art is something else, and you can always do whatever you want. Now, the thing is, there is another way to understand the word rule, which is where you will see people defending them, it is the second meaning that people will sometimes defend, in terms of, yes, there are certain rules, that are good to know. I would argue the better word here is principle, but it's just that's just about communication. The main thing is that we know, we understand each other, we know what we're talking about. So what we're talking about here are patterns that you can observe. Okay? We're talking about our observations, our reflections about how certain material or medium behaves when you do certain things. This is where we're talking about craft, and this is where we're talking about principles. It's the same as in science, you could say, or just, when we're talking about the universe, we're not talking about the rules. We're not talking about, the rules of gravity, the Newton's rules, okay? But we are talking about laws, and we're talking about principles, because these are more about, they are describing what happens when you do something. And these patterns you can always observe for yourself. This is never, again, just like with universal principles, no one can be like, well, I'm the authority on that and I decide that this is the way it is, and you just have to blindly believe them, and then either you follow that or not. There are principles that you can observe time and time again, the way that things go, certain patterns that repeat, certain way that things work out, certain effects that things have, that you can observe by yourself, by practicing certain art. Like, for example, in music, you've probably heard, I don't know, maybe you haven't. Oh my God, I just noticed this thing here. I bet someone has been bothered by that. I don't know. There are always so many things that I just notice after I record a video, and then I'm like, oh yeah, there was this one hair sticking out like that. So, whatever, such is life. So, what was I saying? In music, yeah, you've probably heard of this idea that, or maybe you haven't, I don't know. But there is this idea that, major scale, if you write a song in a major scale, then it's going to be happy, and minor scale, it's going to be sad. And sure, you can just believe that, okay? Katya, the authority on music, the ultimate authority on music, I have said this and that's how it is, and boom, Or you can also go and find a bunch of songs written in major scales and find a bunch of songs written in minor scales and see how you feel. Can you describe what kind of an effect this creates? Or, you can just literally just jam on your own piano or guitar or whatever you have at home. You can jam and try out different scales and see how they sound, okay? Because a minor scale is not always going to be sad. But I don't know. I don't know. You have to figure that out for yourself. And it might be combined with also rhythm. What kind of rhythm you use, what kind of metronome you use. There's so much. I'm not going to get into all the possible elements of, a musical composition here. But there are so many elements, and I know that sometimes it might feel like, okay, if you go to music school, they are just trying to teach you all of these and you just have to memorize all of these elements, blah, 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 blah. But, use them. Can you discover how syncopated rhythm sounds to you, so that you will know when you try to write your own song, like, do you want to use it or not? Because there's no right or wrong. You can always use syncopated rhythm, but you don't have to. The question is, do you want to create the effect, the impact that has on the listener, that it has, on the rest of the song, like whatever it is that you're working with, the emotions that it conveys, maybe if you're writing a musical or something, there's a time and place for that. And I'm not here to tell you when is the right time and place for that, okay? Because no one can tell you that. But what people can guide you through, and what you need to observe for yourself, is what that effect is. That's what I mean. Okay, so maybe if you have a certain song in a musical, and if you change the rhythm slightly, even slightly, how does that change the effect of this song? How does that change the impact of this song? And that's what I'm talking about. These are the principles, And it's the same for creative writing, Your character doesn't need to have a goal, okay? But look at writing, look at the stories where characters don't have goals. I think it's going to be very hard to find one, but still, I think the reason why so often it is said, well, your character needs to have a goal, your character needs to have a goal. It's not because I'm here like, oh, well, I just want to make you suffer and your character needs a goal, okay? But like, write it. Write, 3 versions of your story, and in one, your character has literally 0 goal, no goal at all. Okay? And in another one, let them have some minor external goal. And in another one, let them have some minor internal goal. I don't know, play around with that. And then you will see which one of those is most like what you want to write. Which one do you like the most? Which is the expression that, you want to create? Because when you're an artist, you are like creating a piece of work, and part of the craft is being aware of these principles. Part of the craft is being intentional with these. Okay? That's why you have to know these things. And it's not about knowing, memorizing intellectually, okay? It's about seeing it happen and understanding the effect of what's going on. It's about understanding the material that you're working with so that you can make intentional decisions when you're creating your own stuff. And sometimes teachers will try to convey to you the second type of a rule, which is actually principle, and sometimes they will then switch to something that they believe is an actual rule, and no, your story needs, you need to write a play with 5 acts and that's it, which you don't. Okay, you can write 20 acts, you can write a bajillion of them, you can write just 1 act, who cares, There's no rule. And at the same time, there's no rule, and at the same time, how many acts you put in your play affects how your play is perceived and what kind of what kind of structure it will have, how the characters will evolve, how the scenes will be structured within it, and what kind of an effect you will create. Yeah, hopefully that makes sense. I feel like this is really something I do feel strongly about, but at the same time, it's sometimes I can get a little bit into, I feel like I've been a little bit rambling. I don't know. So yeah, let me know if that makes any sense to you. Yeah. Just maybe to get back to why, one of the main things also why I feel like this is really important is because a lot of people, so many people, oh my God, so many artists, so many writers worry about like right and wrong, correct or incorrect. And that's also where this like fear of making a mistake comes in, or whatever, right? But there is no right or wrong. There is no correct or incorrect because there are no rules, in art in general. If there were rules, then the correct would be the whatever follows the rule, and the incorrect would be whatever doesn't follow the rule. But there are no rules. You can do whatever you want. And this is now the key, instead of worrying like, oh, am I doing this story correctly or incorrectly? Start focusing instead of, is this the story that you want to tell? Or the painting, or, whatever it is that you're working on, whatever kind of art is your medium, Instead of focusing on what is correct or incorrect, focus on like, what do I want to say? What do I want to convey? And then you will use your craft to, try to bring that to life. Okay? Maybe a tiny little side note here. There is also such a thing as exercises, right? Or like just literally learning the craft, which is all about you honing certain skills so that you are then able to, like, whenever you want to actually, write a story, when you want to put those skills into practice, you can do that as intentionally as possible. So what I mean here is, if we were talking about, for example, a character not having a goal, a character having an internal goal, a character having an external goal, which are usually also just two sides of the same coin, but like whatever. If you want to, like, it's part of the craft of creative writing to be able to write really well all of these scenarios, okay? And this is what exercises are for. So when you have an exercise, it is literally like, okay, right now we are specifically practicing, a character reaching or not reaching a very clear external goal within a certain time frame, for example. That can be a good writing exercise, whether you like to write that kind of stuff or not, and it can be the same for like internal goals or whatever. The same for writing, songs in major scales or minor scales or blah, 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 whatever, anything. That's what exercises are for. So you can hone your skills so that then you can be as intentional as possible. Yeah. So that then also when you know what you want to create, you will know how to create it. So all in all, I really feel like I would sum this up with, there are no rules in art, but there are principles, which now you understand what I mean by that. And it's really, really, you need to stop worrying so much about certain authorities and certain institutions. I mean, look, if that's what you like, then great, okay? If you want to pursue a very hardcore career within a certain, circle, like Hollywood that we mentioned before, then fine, there are going to be certain rules that you have to follow to get there, okay? But if you're doing this whole like, ooh, I'm an independent artist thing, well then be one, okay? Be one and stop worrying so much about authorities that are not actual authorities and start, actually working on your art and hone your craft skills. I think that's gonna be like, if you dedicate yourself to your craft, that's gonna be so rewarding to you, and it's also going to lead you to like the authorities that will appreciate your particular art. yeah. Well, at least that's how I see it, you know. I don't know. I'm just a woman on the internet, okay? Expressing my opinion that no one asked for. But here I am. Okay. So yeah, if this resonated, please let me know below. Let me know what you think about rules in art and principles in art and this distinction that I made. I really would love to hear from you. Thank you so much if you're still listening to me, if you're still watching me. And yeah, I will see you in the next video.